Mile high salutes for everyone, because today we cover the Denver Broncos. Stunningly, Elway wins the draft. The Shurmur Solution, and did Drew Lock actually evolve? These are the three keys to the Denver Broncos, brought to you by Football Unlocked. Now, I have been critical of John Elway as a general manager ever since he stepped in the door. His drafts have been bad, his management style had been bad, and other than recruiting Peyton Manning, Elway really hadn't accomplished anything. Even heading into 2018, the drafts were a mess. 2018, he drafts Bradley Chubb, he drafts Cortland Sutton, great picks to start the draft, and then the rest of the draft goes into the wood chipper. Even as the fantasy football world was hyping Royce Freeman, I was sitting in the corner saying, guys, we do realize that undrafted free agent Phillip Lindsay's the best running back in Denver. Clearly the best running back in Denver, right? And in 2019, the Denver Broncos actually had a solid draft, which, when you look at the track record that Elway had been producing, solid was extremely good. They drafted Font in the first round. Now, this comes into question with me, and I know NFL teams love to draft move tight ends, but if you can't block inline, you are a big wide receiver. And teams love these players, and then they play them 35 to 40% of snaps. Teams draft these players very high, and then they give an Eric Ebron $5 million a season in the free agent market. The value that they show in free agency and on the field does not add up with the value that they put in the draft. So while Font is a very good move tight end, I don't want to draft a player who's going to be on the field 35 to 40% of the time with my first round pick. He is very good as a move tight end, but his grade with PFF suffered dramatically because he was asked to play inline. If the player can't succeed on the field in the roles that you're asking them to play, then he's not that good. So they have to put him in the move tight end situation. They have to put him in that role if they want him to produce at a high level to make him worth the first round pick. But then he's only playing 35 to 40% of snaps unless the offense is extremely modern. So this calls into question the value of that pick. Then the Denver Broncos took Dalton Risner. And when I watched Dalton Risner through his college career, he started off at center, and that didn't work. He is not flexible. He keeps his pad levels too high just because he doesn't have the natural ability to bend. And if you watch Kansas State versus Stanford, back in his early days, Harrison Phillips uprooted him and threw him back into the quarterback with no problems. And if you look at the last year for Risner played at tackle, but his athletic mobility was severely challenged at this, which caused him to do a number of cheats in his technique, which can work against college defensive ends, but it wasn't going to work in the pro game. So when they drafted him, I was a little squeamish on it, but then they said right away that he was going to play guard, which is the best position for him. But still, in the second round, you're looking at an average to good NFL grade guard. And then they took Drew Lock. And Drew Lock was my favorite pick of the four in the first 2 days. But I had Drew Lock graded exactly where Denver took him, so it was just solid value. And I don't know if Elway got lucky on this or if Elway knew what he was doing. And the reason for this is when you look at Drew Lock as a junior, that's when I liked him. If you look at him as a senior, I compared him to Brock Osweiler, which I joked would make him Elway's favorite quarterback in the whole wide world. I added Draymond Jones in the third round to round out a draft that was solid. And again, for Elway, solid was quite the accomplishment, which makes what happened in 2020 a borderline miracle. Start the draft off with Jerry Jeudy falling into the laps of the Denver Broncos. When they landed Jerry Jeudy, I was impressed. I said, okay, this is a good start. And then in the second round, a first-round wide receiver in my grading, KJ Hamler, fell in their lap, and they took him as well. And the fantasy football guy inside of me kind of cried a little bit, but the addition of Hamler makes the Denver wide receiving group incredibly dangerous. This will help them function on the field, even though I don't believe Hamler will get the statistical output that you'd want to see from him until his third year. After Hamler, the Denver Broncos added a trio of picks in the third round. They added Ojemudia, who is a great fit from the Iowa system in the Fangio defense. They added McTelvin, Sosa Agim, who was the only reason why you should be watching Arkansas football last year. An incredibly tough physical player whose hands are developing as he moves along. A player who, if you look at Fangio's history, he reminds you in his physicality and the way he goes about the game of Akeem Hicks. But then Denver won, but before the Sosa Agim pick, Denver won the draft by taking Lloyd Cushenberry in the third round. Lloyd Cushenberry was rated very highly on my board. That was the third first-round pick that Denver acquired with their picks on the first 2 days. At this point, Denver had already won the draft. They could have mailed in day 3, and they would have won the draft. It was over. But I sat there with my mouth agape watching Elway continue to make good pick after good pick after good pick. Albert O, Justin Sternat, Netane Mute, Tyree Cleveland, and David Tezuka. Now, I was waiting for the prerequisite pick of a Jacob Budd or a Fumagalli or Josie Jewell, those athletically limited players who are special teams upside glue guy role player guys. That didn't happen. I was waiting for the Juwan Winfrey pick that made us all scratch our head and go, who is this? And no, he's not good. Didn't happen. Denver had won the draft by the end of day 2 and continued to make effective, smart decisions on day 3. So let's circle back. Jerry Jeudy is a phenom. You're going to look back at this pick with Jerry Jeudy going 15th the same way right now we look back at DeAndre Hopkins going 27th in his draft class. You're going to scratch your head and ask why. Now, I'm going to give credit to Gil Brandt on this one because I had it, but he got it too. And when somebody else sees it the same way I see it, I feel the need to give them credit. Gil Brandt on his wide receiver board had his comparisons. And his comparison for Jerry Jeudy was Antonio Brown. Here's the problem for everyone in the league. Jerry Jeudy is faster than Antonio Brown. Jerry Jeudy is taller than Antonio Brown. Jerry Jeudy is a humble student of the game, which Antonio Brown was for a while. Jerry Jeudy runs the best routes I have ever scouted. The best by far. The level of nuance, the ability to be at his top speed incredibly quick, the way he gets in and out of his breaks, the way he separates. It is elite. This is the reason, what he has was the reason why I was very, very high on Terry McLaurin last year. But Jerry Jeudy has it on a level that should have kept him in the top 5 picks. Ruggs went first. Talented wide receiver. Should have been a first-round player. Absolutely has his positives to his game. He is nowhere near Jerry Jeudy. And the Raiders are going to regret this nightmare of a decision for years to come. I like CeeDee Lamb. He is a very, very good wide receiver. There is a difference between a very good wide receiver and a phenom. And Jerry Jeudy is going to be a phenom. And what's great with this offseason is you no longer have to take my opinion on that. You don't have to take me at my word. Because Kareem Jackson, who is a grizzled vet in the Denver Broncos secondary, has said that Jerry Jeudy gets out of his breaks better than anybody he's ever seen. AJ Bouye and Bryce Callahan, 2 of their better corners, said they love going against Jerry Jeudy because it forces them to stay on their technique, which means that if they're not playing proper technique, Jerry Jeudy is killing them. On top of that, Emmanuel Sanders, who has been in this league for roughly 10 years, asked Jerry Jeudy to work out with him in the offseason so he could pick Jerry Jeudy's brain on how to run routes better. That's a lot of praise, high-end praise, coming from some veteran players who have done this before and done this at a very high level. There's almost a snicker of like, we know something you don't know, to the comments that are coming out of the players when they talk about Jerry Jeudy. They see what it is. And that's something you see regularly with players, where you look at film and it's hard to evaluate. But if you put a player on a field with a bunch of players who have done this for a long time, they know who can ball. And everyone in Denver right now knows Jerry Jeudy can ball. And while this Denver draft is littered with good players, in fact, I think they have 6 starters out of this draft class. The reason why they win the draft is because they got a second player who I feel will be elite in Lloyd Cushenberry. Now, I don't know why he went in the 3rd round. I wouldn't have done that. Maybe it has something to do with the fact that his last year was dramatically better than his second to last year. In his second to last year, Lloyd Cushenberry was an athlete, and he was all elbows and knees. He was uncoordinated, he was scatterbrained, he was just reacting to everything he saw, and everything was going 1,000 miles per hour. But in his last year at LSU, you saw everything slow down dramatically for Lloyd Cushenberry. And he's not the type of center who's going to truck you off the line. And he's not the type of center who has the elite lateral quickness. But his measurables at 6'3" with 34-inch arms are elite for that position. His 315 carrying weight is great for that position. But what sets Cushenberry apart is his flexibility. If you wanted to define the traits of flexibility that you want to see from an interior offensive lineman, just look at Lloyd Cushenberry. That's the max. That is maxed out. So when you see him in the run block game, you'll see the first hit, stalemate. But the second hit, he has leverage on everyone because he's able to play with his pads lower than everyone. So on the second step, he uproots you. On the third step, his trunk strength is phenomenal, and he will turn you or uproot you. And then on the fourth step, he's either shoving you out of the hole or he's putting you on your butt. You see this over and over and over with him. The other thing about Cushenberry is that he can rally into lost blocks. There are a lot of offensive linemen that you can use the saying, when they're even, they're leaving. When the defensive lineman gets even with the player, they're going to hit your quarterback. But that's not the case with Lloyd Cushenberry. And this is a trait that I liked a lot about Eric McCoy last year as well. But Cushenberry does it even better. If you turn on that Auburn tape with LSU, you will see multiple circumstances of this. There was a play where Damian Lewis passed off Derek Brown. Top 10 pick, Derek Brown. And Derek Brown had a full head of steam and was going into the backfield. Now, Cushenberry didn't see this until late. It was a bad pass off. It was a bad exchange. There was bad communication. But Cushenberry was still able to rally back into this. He chased him uncoordinatedly. He was off balance, and he planted his right leg and dropped his hip in front of Derek Brown. And Derek Brown, a top 7 pick, a freak of nature athlete, hit Cushenberry, and it looked as if a semi-truck ran into a brick wall. He stopped him dead in his tracks. He was off balance. He flattened that momentum in one hit. And that's because Cushenberry plays lower than anyone I have ever seen. Now, there are some issues in Cushenberry's game, but if you look at the change from his second to last year to his last year at LSU, the number of issues shrunk on an unprecedented level. Right now, my issues with his game, yes, his lateral quickness isn't elite. Yes, he doesn't get that first pop in his favor, and that might be something that never changes, and it doesn't need to. The only issue that needs to change with Cushenberry is that he has some communication issues, and he has a nasty habit of not knowing if he should shoot his arms or high-low shoulder carry a defensive end who's coming, or a defensive lineman who's coming past him. He gets stuck in the in-between, and when he shoots his long arms at the wrong time, his long arms are actually to his detriment. When he shoulder carries, it's taking on the momentum at a later stage in the pass rush. So if he can iron this out, you can just rename him Lloyd Pouncey, because He has the ability in him and has very few issues to iron out to put him on the level with the Pouncey brothers. That is a phenomenal center. And that is a phenomenal third-round pick. And that's where the Denver Broncos won this draft. Now for the second key, you look to Shurmur. Shurmur shouldn't have been fired from the Giants. Betcher, his defensive coordinator, was an anchor that tore that whole thing down. Shurmur did a fine job. And every time I see a defensive coordinator who deserves to be a head coach, my first question always is, who's the OC? Who are you going to pair yourself with who is good, but not young enough and hot enough name to leave? Shurmur fits that perfectly. Good offensive coordinator, probably not getting a head coaching job, so that this team can stay together for the long run. And Shurmur's system never looked right with the Giants. He didn't get to pick his offensive linemen. He didn't have the right weapons on the field. It just didn't add up. So then he comes to Denver. And this system fits Drew Lock like a glove. The last time Shurmur's offense looked right, his quarterback was Case Keenum. They went 13-3 with Case Keenum. Drew Lock can do everything that Case Keenum can do, and he has a bigger arm to be able to attack the same windows. At running back, they had Dalvin Cook for 4 games. When he went down, the backfield was Latavius Murray and Jerick McKinnon. The Broncos have Phillip Lindsay and Melvin Gordon. They'll be just fine there as well. So you look over to the 3 wide receivers that are important in this system. The number 1 vertical deep down the field playmaking threat. They had Stephon Diggs in Minnesota. They have Cortland Sutton in Denver. The tight end is a very important position in this system as well. Kyle Rudolph was the go-to in Minnesota. And Denver lacked this until they brought in Albert O. Now between Albert O, Font, and Vannett, they should be able to piece this position together to get what Shurmur needs from that position. But a very important piece is the number 2 wide receiver. They need a possession. Great route runner, great timer, easy open wide receiver. And Denver did not have this until they drafted Jerry Jeudy. Now they have someone who can do everything Thielen can do while being more dynamic. That is every piece you need. There are 2 glue guy pieces in the system as well. Tim Patrick fits one, KJ Hamler fits the other. It's not a dynamic, huge role, but they have every piece they're looking for. Now you may be asking, what about the tackle situation? Because even if Jawan James didn't opt out, the tackles in Denver are a little bit leaky. With Shurmur, he has had a way around that. In Minnesota, again, when they went 13-3, their tackle situation was dire. He does a good job with his sprint outs, his misdirection, his boots, and the quick passing game to be able to protect his tackles as much as any offensive coordinator can. Would it be good if Denver could upgrade the position in the future? Yes. But it's not necessary for this offense to function with the pieces that it has. Now, key 3 is very important to Denver going forward. I talked about the 2019 draft and how I thought it was pretty solid, which is great for Elway, but that could change on one man's shoulders, and that was Drew Lock. Now, Drew Lock is probably one of the most interesting situations, quarterback scouting situations, that I have ever encountered. And the reason for this is he has changed more in 3 years than any player I have ever seen. When you look back at his junior season, and I was already scouting him because I expected him to declare, you saw Drew Lock as a quarterback who could run through his progressions quite well, made incredibly smart decisions in the pocket, was able to slide with basic footwork in the pocket to buy a little bit of time, and when he saw a play was dead, he killed the play, threw it over a wide receiver's head out of bounds, much like you see with Matt Ryan. He was a very smart quarterback who had a great deep ball. His mechanics were very different than the mechanics you see today. He had a timing touch with his base, which left him in a base that was positioned beautifully like Tom Brady. You saw the hips open, you saw the arm nice and loose. He had touch, he had accuracy, and he had a beautiful, beautiful deep ball. But he stayed for his senior season. And I heard that one of the reasons he stayed is because they hired a new coach who was going to help him modify his game and become more pro style. And that put up a red flag in my head, but I set that red flag aside. Also in his junior year, the big flaw you saw with Drew Lock is that he did not do anything off platform. He rarely was in off-platform situations. When he was off-platform, he was completely out of control, and he couldn't put the ball where he wanted it to be with any regularity. So his senior season happens, and I'm not watching Missouri because I know I'm going to watch this full portfolio of film at the end of the season. And I hear somebody on a program in the SEC talking about how Drew Lock's amazing arm talent. And I pause and I go, no, in his junior year, I compared him to Matt Hasselbeck, a one-win, half-win quarterback, and arm talent is not his calling card. So I kind of laughed about it and said, yeah, this guy doesn't know what he's looking at. And then I heard it again, and I heard it again, and I heard it again. And I thought, okay, I need to go back and watch what is happening with Drew Lock right now. So I went to YouTube to find the first full game tape I could find on him. I turned it on, and quickly I was appalled. His new pro-style coach had broken him. His stride step, instead of a timing tap, was now a long stride step. This put him off balance. It also made it impossible for him to open his hips, so he lost torque and his body did not flow through the throwing motion. He also engaged his shoulder more. This was the one good change. But then he threw with everything he had in his arms. So you saw laser beams being thrown around the field, but the base was off kilter. The hips couldn't move. The shoulder was a positive change. And then the arm was overtaxed. So he lost accuracy, he lost touch, and they asked him to be more creative. Try more back shoulder throws. So instead of hitting the deep ball and dropping it over the wide receiver's shoulder and perfectly in the bucket, now he was taking guys who were already past their cornerback and trying to throw a back shoulder throw, which did not work. They asked him, instead of making the smart decisions in the pocket and getting rid of the ball when the play was dead, they asked him to try and create. And they didn't teach him how to create at all. He had two go-to moves, and they were both terrible, and he failed with both of them. He would sprint out on a full sprint, completely uncontrolled, and throw the ball and had no accuracy whatsoever. And he would also bail into a back pedal and try and throw off his back foot, which very few quarterbacks in the league can do. So this is why you don't trust quarterback development to people who aren't high-ranking, elite quarterback guru professionals. Because at this point in time, he had gone from Matt Hasselbeck, who could start and get you a half a win to a win, to Brock Osweiler, who doesn't belong in the NFL. At that time, I joked that he had become Elway's favorite quarterback in the draft and that he was destined to go to Denver if Elway had watched his senior season. Some people love this. There were high-end NFL caliber throws on his senior tape. But the substance wasn't there. It was erratic. And that made evaluating him very difficult because you didn't know who he was. Was he the junior year version? Was he the senior year version? Well, then I heard the name that makes you sit up in your chair, Jordan Palmer. And I went into his pro day saying, I'm going to evaluate him based on one thing and one thing only. What does his base look like? What does his base look like when he throws? Because he could have the timing step, he could have the long stride. Which is he going towards? Which is he gravitating towards? Because that will tell me which player he is gravitating towards becoming. He was a broken toy. He had the timing tap, he had the stride step, he had the easy open hips, he had the choked off hips, he had weak shoulder engage, which was negative. He had a positive positive emphasis put on his shoulder engagement. He had the light tax arm with nice loose fluid accuracy and touch. He had the overtaxed arm that was erratic. Which was he going to be? But also in the back of my mind, I had a hope. And that hope was, this is a quarterback who grades as a 0 in his adaptable mechanics. Yet, this is a quarterback who has a good hip turn, has a good wrist flick, and has an NFL caliber arm. If you put those three traits together and you go from no technique in adaptable mechanics, they can gain in adaptable mechanics. Now, what are adaptable mechanics? Adaptable mechanics are your ability to throw off platform. Drew Lock failed at this in college every single year, but he also looked like a kid trying to throw a ball for a first time. He didn't do anything in his mechanics that made any sense whatsoever. And there are a bunch of different ways that you can learn how to do this. And there are a bunch of different techniques that different quarterbacks use. I would subscribe to looking at Aaron Rodgers because he does all of them. I would not subscribe to looking at Patrick Mahomes because he does some stuff that no one else can do. So Drew Lock's pro day comes, and I don't put much weight in pro days because I don't care about a guy throwing in shorts. But I do tune into them from time to time to see if mechanical flaws are being fixed in the offseason, at least if they're making the attempt. First couple throws, and throughout the whole thing, you see Drew Lock is back in his timing tap step. And I go, perfect. He's Matt Hasselbeck. Moving on. And then Jordan Palmer blew everything I thought out of the water. And really, when you look at Tom House, the other quarterback guru everyone talks about, his big success story was Tom Brady. And the change he made in Tom Brady isn't as dramatic as people think it is. And I'll discuss that on another video. But with Drew Lock, this is the feather in Jordan Palmer's cap. This elevates him to a totally different level. This says, yeah, this guy is the guy right now. And what happened is, not only did he take both sides of this quarterback, break it apart, and put it back together perfectly, but Drew Lock evolved. When Drew Lock re-emerged in the 2019 season, you saw the timing tap from the junior year, you saw the easy open hips from the junior year, you saw the shoulder drive from the senior year, and you saw the easy open arm, or easy loose arm with accuracy and touch from his junior year. That alone is awe-inspiring. We have seen so many quarterbacks get their mechanics tinkered with, get broken, and never come back. And Jordan Palmer not only brought back junior year Drew Lock, but he added the shoulder drive so that some of the extra velocity that he gained in his senior year stayed with him. But why stop there? It's just awe-inspiring to me. I apologize. But as I said, there are different ways to handle adaptable mechanics. There are different ways to kill your momentum so that you can be balanced and throw in an off-platform situation. And we saw three really common examples of this week. When you saw the Davante Adams touchdown in the corner, Aaron Rodgers hop-stepped into his run to the right. He used his knees and his base to kill his momentum. He popped open his hips. He flicked his shoulder. He flicked his wrist and drove the ball into the corner of the end zone for a touchdown. You see with Josh Allen, when he's running to the right, he will do a skip steps to stall out his momentum as he goes into the air so he can be more composed and throw a ball downfield. Drew Lock does something different, and I almost want to imagine that Jordan Palmer took him off to the side and said, now throw like this. How did that feel? Throw like this. How did that feel? Throw like this. How did that feel? And whichever was most comfortable for him, he just went ahead with it. Because you can do it a number of different ways, but every quarterback is different and you have to find what is best for them. What Drew Lock uses, I call a post step. Now, this is the same thing that Haskins uses. This is the same thing that Roethlisberger uses. And when Drew Lock is running now to the right, he will slam his front foot down into the ground to kill his momentum and use that as an access to spin his body off of. You saw this in their game with the touchdown pass to Noah Fant. This was points on the board. If he couldn't do this, no points. That's why this is an evolution, because he gained the ability to use something in the game that will make the outcome better. This is not adjusting to the game. This is not finding the system that fits well with your talents. This is an actual talent. This is an actual skill that he has acquired that makes him better. That is what an evolution is on a quarterback. It's not just getting accustomed to the league. Now, when he in college would backpedal out of the pressure, now he does a post step with his opposite foot. He will step back, rock back onto his left foot, and he will spin his body off of that so that he can make that throw. Now, in college, every time he was out of sorts, every time he was pushed off platform, your success rate was extremely, extremely low. I said he was a 0. Now he's average. By NFL standards, he's average. And this is going to add a half a win to his capabilities as a quarterback. That is a true evolution. And I wrote an article about this last year when he started playing in the 2019 season. But at the time, I was still a little bit nervous. The adaptable mechanics that he was showing, while he was showing technique in this area that was going to give him the chance to vault his game forward, it still looked rocky. It still looked a little uncoordinated. It still looked uncomfortable. So that was one of the key things I was watching in this Denver-Tennessee game, and it's galvanized, folks. It's there. Now, old habits die hard. The Fant play absolutely was there. There was a throw late in the game where he threw a ball towards Judy where it almost went in the hands of Vaccaro. If you watch that play again, you'll see the shoulder did not come through on the throw. That took velocity off the throw, and that's why that ball was in harm's way as badly as it was. Earlier in the game, you also saw on the goal line where he floated a ball up over the head of the tight end on the backside of the play because Harold Landry was coming down the barrel. Now, if he had done his post step off his second step, he takes one step back with his right foot, takes one step back with his left foot to bail away from Landry and lets it go. At that point in time, he can float that ball up and land it in the tight end's hands. Again, that's points. Old habits die hard. He took 3 steps backwards, got himself on the right foot, the wrong foot, and tried to make that throw, and that's why it sailed. So the adaptable mechanics, the post step, they do look comfortable in him, but he's still young. He's still going to make the mistakes, and he's still going to fall back on old habits, old bad habits every once in a while. But right now, that post step change in his adaptable mechanics is galvanized. He's doing it almost every single time. And when you think about the situation a quarterback faces in a game, between 30 and 50% of the time, they are going to be on the move. They are going to be having to avoid pressure. They are going to have to make something out of a play. They have to bring about their own creativity. Drew Lock could not do this coming out of college. Jordan Palmer found the right technique for him to use to unlock this ability in him. And that is a huge development for Denver and vaults the grade on the 2019 draft up significantly. As I said, I had him as Matt Hasselbeck 2.0 coming out of college, and one game in, after seeing the post step, I made a correction article stating that, yes, this guy is on his way to evolving, and that is very, very rare. Now, this season's still going to be a difficult season for the Denver Broncos. You are extremely young, and while all the pieces seem to be coming together, there could be a couple upgrades made on this team that are very important. Obviously, a tackle would help. A high-grading tackle would help the offense, but it is not necessary. But there is one position that is a hallmark position in all of football that the Denver Broncos desperately need. You heard on the program Lewis, Captain Obvious, Riddick, talking about how A.J. Johnson was a rising star. We knew that halfway through last season. But A.J. Johnson is the perfect Robin in the Fangio system. You need Batman. You need a linebacker who can range sideline to sideline, who is big and physical, who can drop into coverage, handle all the responsibilities, and most importantly, is a lethal blitzer. Sounds pretty rare. Kind of sounds like what people thought Devin White was and what Devin White has been used in the Bulls scheme. But every game you lose this year, Denver, take it as a positive, because there is likely to be that linebacker in the 2021 draft. His name is Micah Parsons. He plays for Penn State. And if you can add this piece to your defense, the arrow pointing up on the trajectory of your team gets a rocket pack booster put on it. You can walk away from Von Miller, who Father Time seems to be coming for, and you will be no worse for wear. Fangio has always used one of his linebackers to be a player who creates a lot of pressure. And Micah Parsons would be a phenomenal weapon for this defense and allow A.J. Johnson to play more in coverage where he shines the brightest. This is what you're hoping for this season. Your team is too young to accomplish anything great. You want to see the growing pains. You want to see the positive things going, or you want to see this going in a positive direction. But if you're bad, that's not a bad thing, because if you get Micah Parsons, this defense is going to be fire. As always, guys, go down to the comments section, tell us how we can improve, and tell us what you want us to see. Make sure you hit subscribe and ring the bell. Little spoiler, the next one's going to be the Green Bay Packers, my team. And if there's a team you want us to cover soon, let us know. As always, love you. We need you. Stay strong, and we'll see you on the other side.